I grew up in a quiet town in northern Illinois, in one of those neighborhoods where every house looked nearly identical. White siding, trimmed lawns, small front porches. My parents bought our house in 2003, when I was 8 years old. It sat at the very end of a cul-de-sac, which made it feel safe. You could ride your bike in the middle of the street and never worry about cars. My bedroom was upstairs, facing the backyard. At night, I could see the tree line that marked the edge of our property. Beyond those trees, there was a small creek, and then nothing but woods for miles. I used to fall asleep, watching lightning bugs blink in the dark, thinking the forest behind our house looked peaceful. That changed one summer night in 2005. It started with noises, soft rustling outside my window. I thought it was raccoons at first. They sometimes got into the trash cans, but this sounded different. It was slow, deliberate, like footsteps moving through grass. I remember lying still, holding my breath, trying to convince myself I was imagining it. But then I heard a sound I'll never forget. A low, drawn-out exhale, like someone trying to stay quiet while breathing through their nose. I jumped out of bed and ran to my parents' room. My dad went outside with a flashlight but didn't see anyone. Just the wind moving the tree branches. He told me to stop watching scary movies and go back to sleep. The next night, though, it happened again. Around 11 p.m., when everything was silent, I heard faint tapping on the glass. Not random, but steady. Tap, tap, tap. I pulled the blanket over my head and tried to pretend it wasn't happening. But curiosity got the better of me. I slowly peeked out from under the blanket, glanced toward the window, and saw a shape standing outside. It was tall, almost touching the bottom of the roof overhang. The moonlight was bright enough that I could make out shoulders, a head, and something long hanging from one side. For a second, I thought it was a branch, but then it moved. The shape tilted, just slightly, as if leaning closer. I screamed for my parents. When they ran in and turned on the light, the shadow vanished. My dad rushed outside again, but this time he found footprints, bare footprints, pressed into the soft dirt below my window. He called the police, who walked around the yard with flashlights. They said the prints could belong to a teenager or a homeless person cutting through the woods. They promised to patrol the area that night, but nothing came of it. For the next week, I slept in my parents' room. Nothing happened. Eventually, life went back to normal. Or, at least, it seemed that way. 2 weeks later, my dad installed motion sensor lights along the side of the house. I remember watching from the window as he tested them. They'd flash on whenever something moved near the bushes or the fence. That first night after installing them, I slept in my own bed again. Around midnight, I woke up to the sound of the click the lights made when they switched on outside. A bright white glow filled the yard. I thought maybe an animal had triggered it, but curiosity pulled me to the window. When I looked down, the light flickered. Once, twice, and then stayed off. For a few seconds, my eyes struggled to adjust to the darkness. Then I saw it. A figure standing at the edge of the yard, halfway between the trees and the fence. It wasn't moving, just standing perfectly still, facing my window. I remember whispering to myself, "It's not real. It's just a shadow." But then the lights turned back on, and the figure took a slow step forward. It wasn't a trick of light. Someone was there. I backed away from the window and crawled to my door, too scared to stand. When I opened it, the hallway light was already on, My mom had heard the click too. She saw my face, grabbed me, and pulled me downstairs. My dad grabbed his rifle and went outside again, shouting into the yard. He stayed out there for almost 20 minutes before coming back in, shaking his head. The figure was gone. He said he'd found the gate to the backyard open, though, even though he'd locked it earlier. Over the next few days, weird things started happening. My bike, which I always left leaning against the porch railing, was found lying at the edge of the woods one morning. One of our garden tools disappeared and turned up rusted near the creek. My parents tried to convince themselves it was kids messing around, but I could see they were scared too. Then came the last night. It was a Saturday in late August. I stayed up reading with a flashlight because I was too anxious to sleep. Around 1 a.m., the motion lights went off again. Only this time, they stayed on. And I heard something tapping. Not on the window glass, but on the wall beneath it, like fingernails against wood. I froze. The tapping moved along the wall, slow and deliberate, until it reached the corner of the house. Then came that same quiet exhale I'd heard the first night, drawn out, shaky, almost curious. I couldn't take it anymore. I ran downstairs to my parents' room. My dad didn't even hesitate. He grabbed his jacket, loaded his rifle, and ran outside barefoot. Mom and I waited by the front door, hearts pounding. We heard him yell, "Hey, who's out here?" Then silence. A few seconds later came 2 loud cracks, branches snapping, followed by my dad shouting, "Get back inside." When he came in, his face was pale. He said he'd seen a person standing by the trees, wearing what looked like a long, torn coat. When my dad shouted, the figure bolted into the woods, barefoot. The police came again, searched the area with dogs, but found nothing except deep footprints in the mud, leading toward the creek and disappearing there. For the rest of that year, I refused to sleep near the window. My parents nailed the blinds shut and eventually installed metal bars across it. We never saw the figure again. We moved out of that house when I was in high school, but the memory never left me. Sometimes, when I visit my parents, I drive past the old place just to see it. Last year, curiosity got the better of me. I parked across the street one evening and just watched the window that used to be mine. The new owners had replaced it with a bigger one, and they'd cleared most of the trees. The yard looked smaller, less ominous. But here's the part that chilled me. The motion lights were gone. Just before I drove off, I saw a kid, maybe 8 or 9, run up the stairs inside. The bedroom light turned on. I could see the faint outline of him standing by the window, just like I used to. And for a split second, I thought I saw something move at the edge of the yard, a tall shape near the tree line, half hidden in the dark. I blinked, and it was gone. I didn't wait around to see if the lights would come back on. That was 20 years ago, but I still sleep with my curtains closed and a heavy dresser pushed against the window. Because even now, when the wind moves just right, I swear I can still hear that quiet, deliberate tap, tap, tap. When I was 9, my family spent every summer at my grandparents' old farmhouse in rural Iowa. It sat in the middle of a huge field. No neighbors for a mile, just endless corn and an old collapsing barn behind the house. To me, it felt like a different world, quiet, peaceful. Until that one summer. The first night we got there, I saw something strange from the upstairs bedroom window. The barn door was slightly open, swinging in the wind. Nothing weird about that, except for a faint yellow flicker inside, like someone walking with a lantern. When I told my grandfather, He said no one had used that barn in years. He even showed me the heavy padlock on the door the next morning. But I knew what I'd seen. That evening, I was on the porch when I noticed someone standing out in the cornfield. Just a dark figure, still, maybe 50 yards away. The setting sun made everything orange and hazy, but I could see they had something over their head, like a sack or hood. I blinked, and they were gone. When I told my mom, she said it was probably a scarecrow, but we'd never had one in that field before. The next few nights were uneasy. The dog wouldn't go outside after dark. The motion light over the porch kept clicking on for no reason. Then one night, I woke to the sound of the back door creaking open. I sat up frozen. Footsteps moved slowly across the old wooden floor downstairs. When I called for my mom, the sound stopped. Then, after a long silence, I heard the back door slam shut again. In the morning, the door was still locked from the inside. That was the first time I saw fear in my grandfather's face. My mom said we'd leave the next day, and he didn't argue. That night, though, I couldn't sleep. I kept staring out at the barn, waiting to see that light again. Around 2 a.m., it appeared, soft and swaying inside the barn. Then slowly, the barn door opened. A figure stepped out. Even from upstairs, I could tell it wasn't my grandfather. It was too tall, too thin, and its movements were off, like its joints weren't bending right. It walked stiffly toward the house. I ran to wake my mom. She got Grandpa, and we all looked from the window. When he switched on the porch light, the yard was empty. The barn door was wide open. He grabbed his shotgun and went outside. Mom locked us in the room. We heard him yell something, then silence. When he came back, he said he found footprints in the mud leading into the barn, but nobody inside. He nailed the door shut before going to bed. We left at sunrise, but when Grandpa went to load the truck, there were small muddy handprints on the driver's door, like a child's. On the drive into town, he finally spoke. He told my mom that years ago, a boy from a nearby farm had gone missing near that field. They never found him, but some neighbors swore they saw a figure in the corn late at night, afterward, carrying a faint light. We never went back after that summer. The farmhouse sat empty for years before someone bought it. About 5 years ago, I looked the property up online. The listing photo showed the same house, just older, worn down. The barn was gone, burned in a storm. But in that sunset photo, behind the house, something caught my eye. In the far corner of the field, between the corn rows, there's a faint outline of a person, tall, still, half hidden in the stalks. The description said, "No people present during photo." But I know better. And sometimes, when I close my eyes, I can still see that thing walking out of the barn, slow, stiff, and silent, coming straight toward the house. When I was 8 years old, my mom and I lived on the top floor of a small duplex outside Portland, Oregon. Our building faced another, just like it, across a narrow alley. You could see straight into the windows opposite yours if the blinds were open. It was quiet, kind of lonely, until I started seeing her. It was a cool fall evening. I was doing homework near the window when I noticed someone standing in the window across the alley. A girl, maybe my age, wearing a yellow sweater. She waved. I waved back, and she smiled. That became our thing. Every few days, we'd spot each other through the window and wave. I never saw her outside, and she never spoke. But I remember thinking she looked lonely, like I was. Then one evening, I realized something strange. She was always wearing that same yellow sweater. A week later, it was storming outside. Rain smacked the glass, the power flickered, and I was too scared to sleep. Around 10 p.m., I looked out the window. The girl was standing there again. Same spot, same sweater, staring right at me. I waved. She didn't move. Then the lights went out. When the power came back, she was gone. I ran to tell my mom, but she said no one lived in that unit. The house across the alley had been empty for months. But I'd seen her, and sometimes the light in that window would flicker late at night, like someone was walking around with a flashlight. I started keeping my blinds closed after that. But a few nights later, curiosity got the better of me. I peeked through, just for a second. She was there again. But this time, she didn't wave. She slowly raised her arm and pointed downward, toward the ground floor of our building. Then she smiled and turned away from the window. I shut the blinds fast and tried to forget it. That night, I woke up to a soft tapping on my window. Our apartment was on the second floor. There was no balcony, no ledge, nothing someone could stand on. The tapping stopped, then came again. Slower this time. I finally looked, nothing. But on the glass, near the corner, was a faint muddy handprint. My mom didn't believe me. She said I probably pressed my own hand there earlier. So the next morning, I cleaned the window. Every inch of it. That night around 2 a.m., I woke to a scraping sound. Something was moving against the glass. Slow, rough, like fingernails dragging. When I turned my head, she was there. The girl in the yellow sweater, face pressed to the glass, eyes wide, grinning. She wasn't across the alley anymore. She was right outside my window. I screamed, and my mom came running. By the time she turned the light on, the window was empty. When she went outside with a flashlight, she found wet footprints on the grass, leading from the side of the house to right beneath my window. But they just stopped there. The police came the next day. They checked the alley and the house across from us. The officer told my mom the place was still vacant. No furniture, no power, just dust and spiderwebs, but he mentioned something else. Upstairs, in the room facing ours, they found footprints in the dust. Small ones, bare feet. That night I slept in my mom's room. We stayed with my aunt for a few days after that, and when we came back, my mom nailed my bedroom window shut. Life went on. We never saw her again. Years later, when I was in college, my mom finally sold the place. I hadn't thought about that night in years. Until a few months ago, when I saw a news article online. It was about that same duplex being renovated. The workers had found something sealed behind the wall of an upstairs bedroom, the one facing ours. Inside was an old wooden box containing small toys, a cracked photo, and a folded yellow sweater. The article said police suspected it was connected to a missing girl case from the early 2000s. A child who used to live there. She disappeared one rainy night. Her last known sighting was by a neighbor who said she'd often be seen standing in her window, watching someone across the alley. They never found her body. I didn't sleep that night. I kept remembering the smile on her face, how it didn't look evil or ghostly, just lonely, like she wasn't trying to scare me, like she wanted someone to finally notice her. And sometimes, when I look out my window now, I still half expect to see her across the way. That faint yellow glow, that small, unmoving figure behind the glass. Every time I turn off my bedroom light, I check the reflection in the window. And once, just once, I could have sworn I saw it again. A blur of yellow in the corner of the glass, and a small pale hand waving back.